I was lying belly down on the shag carpet in our living room, fiddling with the rabbit ears on the zenith. The TV kept flickering between static and a faded image of someone doing the hustle. Meanwhile, out front, my brother's Chevy Chevette was parked half on the curb, driver's door wide open, and I could hear the clunk of the hood slamming down. Again. He'd been out there for almost an hour already, swearing under his breath in that way he thought Mom couldn't hear. That Chevette, baby blue with duct tape on the passenger door, was his pride and joy, even if it stalled at every red light. He was trying to fix some weird squeak it started making last week, right when he'd promised we'd all be inside by 8 to watch the Disco Inferno special on Channel 7. Inside, the house smelled like fried bologna sandwiches and Jell-O 1, 2, 3, that layered dessert Mom kept pretending was fancy. The avocado green clock over the kitchen stove ticked louder than it should have, and the Oster blender from our wedding gift pile made a brief, sputtering appearance when Mom tried mixing a tab float. I had the TV guide open on the floor in front of me, one of those thick Sunday ones from the paper with a cover photo of Donna Summer in shimmering fonts. I'd circled the 8 p.m. block in red pen days ago. We all had. This was the disco special. Clips from Solid Gold, a live appearance from the Bee Gees, even a segment with Casey Kasem doing the countdown in bell-bottoms. But here we were, 7:30, and the Chevette was eating my brother alive. Literally. His arm was wedged under the dash now, trying to yank loose a stuck cassette tape of Andy Gibb. You ever have one of those nights where something dumb and mechanical turns into a full-blown family crisis? By the time the streetlights buzzed to life, casting that orangey glow on our front porch, my brother was already yelling through clenched teeth. Not out of anger, exactly. More like that frustrated panic you get when you're too stubborn to ask for help. His hand was still jammed deep into the guts of the Chevette's dashboard, trying to yank out a cassette tape that had been stuck since last Tuesday. It was one of those off-brand mixtapes from the gas station. Cheap plastic casing, label peeling off, and it had swallowed the tape like a beast. From inside we could hear him grumbling. My dad, sitting in his recliner with a copy of the Reader's Digest on his chest, glanced up toward the window. "If he breaks that dashboard again, he's paying for it this time," he muttered, not moving an inch. Mom was in the kitchen, half watching the clock, half spooning out instant mashed potatoes from a stainless steel pot onto those avocado green melamine plates we got from S&H Green Stamps. The radio on top of the fridge was playing low, "Got to Give It Up" by Marvin Gaye, just starting to climb the charts. She called out toward the front door, "Ronnie, you're gonna miss it. I'm not rewinding the TV for you." She still didn't quite understand how live television worked. I sat cross-legged near the TV, chewing on a bonkers candy, half melted in my pocket, and trying not to miss the previews. Channel 7 was teasing clips of KC and the Sunshine Band rehearsing under a strobe light, and I swear I caught a flash of Cheryl Ladd in sequins. I was already humming along to Boogie Nights, feeling that electricity build in my chest, that childhood kind of excitement that had nothing to do with anything practical. Just joy. Disco joy. But all that was background noise to the real tension building outside. Ronnie had gone from frustrated to furious. You know how you can just feel someone's energy from another room, even if there's 2 doors and a screen window between you? That was my brother. Suddenly there was a loud clack like something plastic snapping, and then silence. No swearing, no rattling, just the sound of cicadas outside and the distant hum of the neighbor's window unit air conditioner dripping onto their porch swing. Then came the words, "I think I'm stuck." Now, I don't mean metaphorically stuck. I mean, arm wedged so deep in the Chevette's guts that he physically could not pull it back out stuck. My sister Lori burst out laughing first. She was on the couch with her legs folded under her, a bowl of tater tots balanced on her lap, and a Mork and Mindy notebook half buried in couch cushions next to her. "That dummy," she said between bites. "That's what he gets for messing with that lemon 5 minutes before showtime." She wasn't wrong. That Chevette had been cursed from the start. The gear shift knob once came off in my hand mid-turn, and there was a mysterious rattle in the trunk no one ever dared investigate. But Ronnie loved that thing. He used to drive laps around the parking lot of Woolco, blasting the Bee Gees from his dashboard speakers like he was cruising down Sunset Boulevard. I poked my head out the screen door. "You serious?" I asked. His voice was distant but deadly serious. "I can't move." Now came the family scramble. Dad finally stood up with a grunt, pulling his belt up like he was about to fight the Chevette. Mom threw on her vinyl slippers, and even Lori came to the door munching a tot, just to witness the spectacle. Out there on the lawn, under the buzz of the porch light, stood Ronnie, bent halfway into the front seat, arm buried up to the shoulder under the dash, looking like a man who had just lost a bet with the gods of Detroit engineering. His face was red, both from the struggle and from knowing what he was about to miss. Inside the house, the clock ticked to 7:58, 2 minutes till disco. 7:59 p.m. The room felt like it held its breath. I was still standing in the doorway, my foot tapping the metal threshold, torn between going back inside to catch the opening number and staying outside to witness what was quickly becoming a Chevette-themed emergency. Ronnie's whole upper body was now wedged into the car, one knee on the seat, the other leg dangling out onto the grass, and he looked like a teenager being slowly swallowed by a bucket seat. Dad stood there scratching his head, bare-chested, his old brown slippers sagging like deflated balloons. "Well, hell, son. Why'd you go reaching all the way in like that?" Ronnie just grunted. Tape got stuck, tried to pull it. The bracket shifted. My watch bands caught on something. I think the vent. Dad muttered something about cheap Japanese dashboards and bent over to peer in like he knew what the hell he was looking at. He didn't. None of us did. Inside I could hear the special starting. That wah-wah guitar kicked in over a dazzling disco intro. Female backup singers in sequins. A deep voice booming over the glitz. "Live from Los Angeles. It's the Disco Inferno Spectacular." And then came the crowd noise, big and glittering and completely out of reach for my brother, whose face was now squished into the steering column. Lori ran back into the house yelling, "It's starting!" as if she were reporting a natural disaster. And Mom, God bless her, decided this was the moment to call the neighbors. She picked up the kitchen wall phone, that yellow rotary one with the extra long coiled cord that always tangled, and dialed the McCarthys across the street. "Elaine, you've got a husband who works with tools." Ronnie got his fool self stuck in the car again. Yes, again. He's gonna miss his disco show. There was something so perfectly 70s about the whole scene. The phone cord stretching halfway across the kitchen while the TV's aluminum foil-covered antenna crackled with static. A stack of TV trays leaning against the wall next to the macrame plant hanger, and the smell of whatever leftover banquet frozen dinner Mom had reheated for Lori. It was chaos and routine all in one. The McCarthys came jogging over a few minutes later, Elaine in her curlers and robe, Jerry holding what looked like a socket wrench and a Schlitz. "What's he done now?" Jerry asked, already smirking. Ronnie, by this point, was sweating like he'd just danced through Studio 54. "Just get me out, man. I'm missing Donna Summer." "Priorities," Jerry muttered with a chuckle. The rescue operation became a full-on neighborhood event. A couple of kids from down the block, Tony and Mikey, I think, rolled by on their banana seat bikes, rubbernecking. "Your brother stuck?" Mikey yelled. "No, he lives there now," I shouted back, and they both cackled as they pedaled off toward the old roller rink by the highway. Back inside, the disco special was in full swing. I could hear the opening notes of "I Feel Love" bleeding through the screen door. I turned and saw the living room glowing in that blue TV light, my sister frozen in front of the screen, her mouth open like she was watching the moon landing. Meanwhile, Mom came out with a Kleenex box, of all things. "Here, put this under his elbow, maybe it'll slide easier." Jerry looked at her like she'd just handed him a banana for surgery. "Kathy, it's not a nosebleed, it's a dashboard." But he tried it anyway. Time kept ticking and I started to feel it, this gnawing anxiety. Not about the arm, about the moment. We were missing it. He was missing it. This thing we'd talked about for days. We clipped the newspaper ad and taped it to the fridge. Ronnie even told the guys at Radio Shack he wasn't going out that night. And now there he was, stuck, humiliated, and worst of all, alone, while the world danced without him. You ever have one of those nights where everything's set up perfect and then something ridiculous just bulldozes it all? I stood there, looking at my brother's legs kicking out of the car, the glow of the TV casting a faint light through the screen door, and that disco beat still pounding away like a far-off party we weren't invited to anymore. By 8:23 p.m., the living room felt like a crime scene. Lori had abandoned her tater tots on the coffee table and was now standing with her arms crossed, glaring at the door like it had betrayed her. The TV volume was up just loud enough for us to hear Gloria Gaynor belting, "Never Can Say Goodbye," over the sound of Dad rummaging through the garage for something long and flat. "Why didn't he just wait till tomorrow?" Lori kept saying. Who messes with a car during a disco special? Outside, Ronnie had gone quiet again, which was worse than the swearing. He wasn't mad anymore. He was defeated. I remember stepping out onto the porch again just to check, and there he was, still stuck, still hunched awkwardly inside that cursed Chevette like a broken action figure. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just let out a sigh. I missed Casey. Yeah, he had. I could hear the crowd cheering on TV, the whoosh of laser lights, and the voiceover saying, "Coming up next, Earth, Wind, and Fire," like some cruel reminder that the night was rolling forward without him. And still, his arm was caught. Dad returned with a yardstick, a literal wooden yardstick, and tried sliding it under my brother's elbow like he was trying to scrape off a pancake. "Hold still," he said, as if Ronnie could do anything else at that point. Jerry McCarthy had taken a break to drink his Schlitz on the curb, offering useless wisdom like, "They don't make dashboards like they used to. Too many dang wires now." Mom was hovering nearby with a damp washcloth, which, in her defense, was her solution to everything. Bloody nose, washcloth; bruised ego, washcloth; son stuck in a car. You guessed it. And through all this, that disco soundtrack kept bleeding out from the living room. Chic, Bee Gees, even a surprise clip from the Jacksons. Lori gave up trying to stay mad and just stood at the doorway, watching with one hand on her hip and the other still holding the TV remote with the clicky buttons, the kind that made that satisfying chunk sound when you changed the channel. You ever notice how some nights feel longer than they are? Like time stretches just enough to make sure you never forget it? This was one of those. I went back inside, sat cross-legged in front of the TV, and tried to enjoy what I could. But it wasn't the same. Not without Ronnie. He was the one who showed me how to moonwalk in socks on our linoleum kitchen floor. He was the one who blasted Rick Dees on Sunday mornings and made fun of my attempt at a disco pose with a broomstick mic. And now he was outside, listening to it all secondhand. At 8:39 p.m., something finally shifted. I heard a loud metallic pop, followed by a high-pitched yow, and then Ronnie's sneakers hitting the lawn. He stumbled backward out of the car, holding his arm like he'd just wrestled a raccoon. There was grease on his cheek. His favorite polyester shirt was half untucked, and that busted Andy Gibb cassette was clenched in his free hand like a war trophy. We all turned. Lori cheered. Mom clapped. Even Dad looked impressed. Ronnie stood there, breathing hard, looked toward the front door, and said, "Did I miss the part with the mirrored stage?" Lori nodded solemnly. All of it. He just sighed, wiped his hand on his jeans, and muttered, "Figures." But then he walked inside, sat on the edge of the couch, and watched the last 15 minutes with us. One shoe off, arm slightly swollen, and a faint smile on his face as Donna Summer sang us out with Last Dance. The special ended at exactly 9 p.m., with the studio audience still clapping and the glitter still falling, even though our living room had gone quiet. The TV screen dimmed into a promo for that week's episode of Three's Company, and the lights from the disco stage faded into the hum of our little house. Ronnie didn't say much, just sat there, rubbing his wrist and chuckling now and then like he couldn't believe how dumb it all had been. I remember handing him the last tab from the fridge, and he popped it open with a hiss, took a sip, and said, "Tastes like disappointment." Mom, always the fixer, brought out a tray of vanilla pudding cups, the kind with the peel-off foil lid and the little plastic spoon tucked inside. "We can't end a Sunday night without dessert," she said. And that was that. The tension lifted like steam off the stovetop. Dad went back to his recliner. Lori flopped sideways on the couch with her head in Ronnie's lap, still humming the chorus to Boogie Nights. I sat cross-legged on the floor again, staring at the screen even though it was just showing commercials for Light Bright and Sea Monkeys now. The Chevette sat outside like nothing had happened, just parked there under the porch light, quiet and smug. Ronnie glanced toward the window, raised the pudding cup like a toast, and muttered, "Stupid car." We all laughed, even Mom. And maybe that's the thing about nights like that. They don't go as planned. They fall apart in slow motion. But somehow, that becomes the magic of it. You forget the parts you were excited for and you remember the parts you never expected. Like how the whole neighborhood came over. How Mom thought a Kleenex box could solve a mechanical failure. How Dad tried to use a yardstick like it was a crowbar. How Lori was too mad to speak until she wasn't. You remember the sound of earth, wind, and fire bouncing off the walls while your brother stood out on the lawn, stuck in a bucket seat with disco dreams dissolving into the night. And you remember how, in the end, he sat beside you anyway. I don't know. Maybe that's what disco was all about deep down. All the flash and flare was fun, sure, but the soul of it, the real heartbeat, was togetherness. Sweaty, sparkly, imperfect togetherness. The dance floor didn't care if you had the moves. It only cared that you showed up. And even with a busted tape, a sore wrist, and a front row seat in the driveway, Ronnie showed up. We didn't talk about that night for a long time. Not because it was embarrassing, but because, well, it just became part of things. One of those family stories that floats around waiting for the right moment to be pulled out, usually around the holidays, when someone brings up the Chevette or disco or pudding cups. Years later, when that old car finally gave out, on the side of Route 18 right in front of the old Montgomery ward, Ronnie just left the keys on the seat and walked home. Said it was about time. He didn't even look back. But I remember that car more for what happened that one May night than for anything else it ever did. Even now, if I close my eyes, I can still hear the faint buzz of the porch light. I can still smell the mix of TV dinners, motor oil, and cheap cologne. I can still see the TV's blue glow bouncing off the fake wood paneling. And I can still feel that particular kind of disappointment you only get when something you looked forward to doesn't quite happen, but somehow turns into something better. There was something sacred about Sunday nights back then. That quiet mix of anticipation and winding down, homework half done, showers still steaming, pajamas with elastic cuffs and feet that were starting to get too small. A stack of Trapper Keepers in the hallway, the smell of plastic and paper and that weird vanilla scent that lived inside every toy box. We didn't have DVRs or replays or YouTube clips to watch the special later. If you missed it, you missed it. That was it. So you had to be there. You had to plan, to care, to show up. And Ronnie didn't make it in time. But in another way, he did. Just not the way we expected. I think about that now, all these years later, whenever life throws me a stuck in the Chevette kind of moment. Plans gone sideways. Good things slipping through your fingers. The moment happening without you. And then I think of my brother, marching back into the house with grease on his face, sitting next to us like it still mattered. Because it did. We didn't need the whole special. Just the last few minutes. Just enough to remind us that even when everything goes wrong, there's still pudding, still laughter, still disco bleeding through the walls. And sometimes, that's all you need to make a night unforgettable. Years later, when I moved out and got my own place, I found that old TV guide tucked in a box of school papers and cassette tapes. The cover was still glossy, Donna Summer in full shimmer, and on the May 8th listing, a smudge of red pen circled, Disco Inferno Special. I don't even remember marking it, but I knew exactly whose pen it was. Mine. Fat red marker from a desk drawer full of peanut stickers and broken crayons. I sat there on my apartment floor, 30 years later, holding that page like it was a photograph. The kind that doesn't show faces, just feeling. And suddenly I was back in that living room. The tick of the kitchen clock, the static hum of the old TV, my brother's voice echoing through the screen door, the faint scent of Old Spice, engine grease, and something sugary baking in a toaster oven. It's funny. Sometimes I remember the disco special itself, the stage lights and songs, but more often I remember what it felt like to be almost part of it, to wait all week for something that never quite arrived. And to end up somehow with something more lasting. A night frozen in amber. A few years back, I brought it up to Ronnie while we were helping Mom pack up her house. He was knee-deep in boxes labeled Xmas and old towels, and I said, "Hey, remember the night you got stuck in the Chevette?" He froze, then laughed, hard. "I still have a scar from that vent clip," he said, lifting his arm like it was a badge of honor. We never got to watch that special again. It never re-aired. No VHS, no bootleg, just gone, like so much from back then. The world moved on. The Chevette rusted into dust. The McCarthys moved away. Casey Kasem retired. And disco, well, it slipped underground, waiting for vinyl collectors and soft-hearted nostalgics to dig it back up. But in our family, May 8th, 1977 became its own kind of legend. And when I think of my childhood, I don't think of big holidays or fancy vacations. I think of TV trays, clicky remotes, cheap candy, buzzing porch lights, and the night my brother became part of the furniture in a Chevy Chevette, while the rest of us danced in place, because it was the only thing left to do. Some nights don't go as planned. Some nights go better.